Game of the year. What can I say? Game of the year. Game of the year. That's all there is to it. Wrap it up. Pack it up. The year is over because this is the best game that is going to come out in all of 2023, more than likely. This game, Baldur's Gate 3, has completely consumed my life. When it came out about a month ago, I wasn't even sure I was really even interested. I had played a little bit of their previous game, Divinity Original Sin 2, and it was good. I didn't dislike it or anything, but I just never really cared. I didn't care to finish it. Like, I got off of Fort Joy, and then I just kind of stopped. You know, that was it. I just kind of stopped. And, I mean, I don't normally play these types of games, these kinds of turn-based CRPG games. Not really my thing. The only turn-based game that I've really played to completion has been, like, Fire Emblem? I don't think that really counts though, because this is a very different beast. So I wasn't really sure I was going to be interested in this game, but I was kind of in the mood for a good RPG, and this one was looking kind of good. You know, the reviews were coming out on day one. People were really excited for it. People were saying good things about it. So I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'll just get it. Worst case scenario, it ends up like a bunch of other games that I play for like 10 to 15 hours and get bored of. That didn't happen. It was the opposite. Instead, what actually happened is that this game completely, thoroughly, absolutely enthralled me body and soul to the point that it was the only thing I could think about for weeks until I finished my first playthrough. And even past that, I started working on something resembling this video, and I ended up playing another whole playthrough before even getting this video out, because I just could not stop playing it. It was so addictive, so much fun, and so much further beyond anything that I had ever expected or really experienced in a game like this, in any kind of RPG. I'm not kidding when I say that this is almost certainly Game of the Year. Granted, I have not played really any of the other contenders for Game of the Year, but I struggle to believe that any of them are anywhere near as good as Baldur's Gate 3. I might even go as far as to say that by the end of this decade, this can potentially be in the conversation for Game of the Decade. Okay? Maybe I'm just, maybe I'm a little bit too hyped up right now because it's still fresh. Maybe the honeymoon period hasn't quite worn off yet, but I do think this game is really, really, really good. And so, in an effort to try to pretend to justify this amount of playtime, I'm going to try and talk to you about it today. Alright, so let's get going. Now, first up, I'm not really a D&D guy. I mean, I've played D&D in the past, and I've played tabletop RPGs in the past. In fact, that's how I primarily met my entire friend group. It was through D&D. But to be honest, D&D specifically isn't really what I remember playing the most. We used the rule set for like maybe 1 or 2 campaigns that I don't think ever finished, if I remember correctly. And then we kind of moved on to like Exalted, I think, and like Legend of the Five Rings. So D&D specifically, I don't really have that much experience with. And I didn't even know D&D had lore, if I'm being honest. For a long time, I thought D&D was just a rule set because most of the campaigns that we played were like homebrewed stuff. So we didn't really make use of any of the lore. I bring this up because going into this game, I knew nothing about Faerun or D&D lore at all. I did not know what a Mind Flayer was. I did not know what a Githyanki was. I did not know what a drow was. I thought hag was just a general term for old women like it is in real life. Don't ask me how I found that one out. So yeah, I just kind of didn't know anything about this game's world going into it. And I bring that up because I'd imagine that a lot of people with this game having such mass appeal and becoming so popular so quickly, a lot of you are probably going to be in a very similar situation. I can assure you, this game is still absolutely enjoyable, even if you know absolutely nothing about D&D lore. Obviously though, if you are already familiar with this world and this lore, then it's going to be even better. And I think even if you don't know nothing like I did going into it, you would benefit greatly from, if you run into something like a term or a god or whatever, maybe just open up a browser, do a quick Google search, you know, fill yourself in on the holes for the really important stuff. But for the most part, it's not really that necessary. I think the game did a pretty good job of telling a compelling story, despite the fact that I knew nothing about the world. You know, as long as you are able to follow basic context clues, it's pretty understandable, even if you know nothing about the lore. That said, as I mentioned, I was familiar to an extent about the rule set of the game. So in terms of the combat, the idea of, you know, ability scores and proficiencies and all of these things, a lot of these were familiar. I don't want to say that I was an expert on any of this. There were definitely things that I had to look up or ask some of my friends who were more familiar with the system. But like, for the most part, I was able to understand a lot of the systems. Because again, I've played tabletop RPGs and I've played D&D before, so it wasn't that big of a deal. That might be a little bit shaky for a newcomer, but to its credit, I do think Baldur's Gate 3 does a pretty decent job of trying to present the information to you in a way that is understandable. So yeah, overall, is it necessary to be a D&D player to enjoy this game? I don't think so. I think even if you have no clue about D&D, this game is quite easy to approach, easy to enjoy, as long as you are willing to, you know, read. And even then, I mean, the game has difficulty options, so you can just choose the easiest option and probably breeze through the entire game. We'll talk about difficulty a little bit later, but yeah, it's a story-driven game, and from what I can tell, if you just want to experience the story, you are quite capable of doing so, even if you don't want to read. And speaking of the story, oh boy, this game, this story, holy shit, it is so good. Now, the thing about Baldur's Gate 3's story is that this is a true RPG. And what I mean by that is, in my opinion warning, okay, but in my opinion, I think the best way to enjoy a game like this is not to play it in a way that is optimal, but rather to think of a character and to role play that character. A lot of RPGs that I've played recently, especially, you know, the RPG features are limited to stuff like stat sticks or, you know, customizing your abilities or things like that of that nature, which is fine, by the way. I'm not trying to knock on that. I enjoy that. That's why I play those games as well. But very rarely do I encounter a video game that really allows you to role play a character where your choices matter to a degree and can influence the story. You know, I'm not saying that this is the only game that does this well, obviously, but this game really, really does it well, and it stood out to me immensely. And I think a big part of that is because of how much content is in this game. And this is something that I'm not really going to be able to get across to you in a video, because it's just something I feel like you have to experience yourself. Just how much content is in this game. Now, usually when you play an RPG, even if it gives you choices, you might still be limited in your choices. I mean, that's to be expected, right? It's a video game. If you want unlimited possibilities, then that's what the tabletop is for. But it does feel like this game really tried to account for every single possible option, every single possible choice that you could have made. Obviously, there are situations where you just have to choose the best one, but damn, they really tried. There is so many choices in this game, so many variations of encounters. I've played like 200 hours, and I'm still discovering new things. And that's something that, again, that one of the good strengths about this game is that it's not afraid to just let you miss content. Like, I know Elden Ring did this as well, where there's just a bunch of stuff for you to discover, and they're not necessarily going to hold your hand and tell you, okay, now you go over here, now you go over here, make sure you see everything, make sure you talk with all of everybody and blah blah blah. Like the game doesn't do that. A character that has a quest doesn't necessarily have a giant exclamation mark above their head or anything. You just have to talk to them. And so you can truly miss a good chunk of content by just not talking to people. And that's fine. actually. I think that's fine. I think that's good, honestly, because again, it just creates a situation where there's so much stuff in the game and stuff that you can miss, and then maybe on another playthrough you notice, oh, I didn't notice that staircase last time. I didn't notice that character. I didn't notice this. I didn't notice that. And then you go, you interact with it, and you find something new. Again, I'm finding new things even on my third playthrough, and that's really hard to do. And a single playthrough, by the way, can take like 80 to 90 hours, well over 100 depending on how efficient you are, because these acts, there are 3 acts, and each act it feels like it could be its own game, truly, because there's just so much meat, just so much meat just stuffed in there. And so if you are a fan of roleplay at all, this game is just, it's so good. It almost feels like a classic BioWare kind of game. But I mean, hell, I'd say probably even better, to be honest. This is really, really good. I feel like this really sets a new standard for RPGs, because it's just the amount of choice, the amount of variations, the amount of options that you have. Again, it's not unlimited. I'm not trying to pretend that it is, but they damn well tried. They fucking tried, bro. They tried to make it unlimited. It's so much. There's so much replayability in this game. Like, this is a game that I can easily see myself playing for like maybe 400 or 500 hours total when it's all said and done. The replayability in this game is insane. And so if you like Baldur's Gate 3, there is a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 to play. While we're on the topic of roleplay, let's also talk about the companions, the cast of the main companions that you come across. These companions are phenomenal. I like pretty much every single one of them. That sentiment is not shared among everybody. I know there are some people that, I don't know, they dislike Gale or Will or whatever. I don't get that, man. They're just dudes. I don't know. I like them. I like all of them. Gale's a little bit too horny. Like both of my playthroughs, he just wanted to fuck me, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. Why can't we just be bros? But outside of that, these characters are phenomenal. Every single one of them has their own issues, their own baggage, their own bullshit, and they also develop quite well as characters over the course of the entire game. And you can even influence how some of them turn out. Just the writing in general, not just for the main companions, but pretty much all of the game. Again, it's just really, really good. And something I should really point out here, again, not just for the companions, but pretty much every character, is the voice performances. Some of these performances are phenomenal. Pretty much all of them are, really. Just the presentation of the entire game, the cutscenes, the music, oh my god, the music. Oh my god, the music. Some of the music is just so good. Oh, I don't want to spoil some of the best stuff, but let me just say that the House of Hope, the boss fight music and the House of Hope, back to the voice performances. Some of these performances in particular stood out to me as extra special. These characters really do feel like characters that you can grow attached to, especially over the course of, you know, a 80, 90, 100 hour campaign. You will get attached to these characters if you take the time to get to know them. And I'd say that for the most part, they pretty much all pay off. There is conversation around some of them not having as satisfactory of an ending, but we know that Larian is working on improving some of these things, and we'll talk about that later. But just in general, some of these performances really took me back at how good they were. And I'm not really normally somebody that nerds out about voice performances, but this game really made some of them stand out. Like, it's so good. This game is so good. Oh, game of the year. Game of the year! So in case you haven't figured it out, this is a game where you probably want to talk to as many people as you can. Not just to not miss out on content, but also just because it's worth it. This is that type of game. It is a very story-driven, character-driven kind of experience where it's not just about following the MSQ, it is about immersing yourself in Faerun with these characters in the moment. It's just good. But anyway, let me stop sucking off the story and the characters and stuff, because at the end of the day, this is a video game, right? What's the gameplay like? This is a D&D game, so it largely depends on what kind of character you want to make. So for me, my first two characters were very much martial classes. I want to get in there, I want to fight, because that's me like swing big sword. But of course, you can build your character to potentially talk your way out of situations if you want to. You can be sneaky, you can do pretty much whatever. It is, again, it's an RPG, so just make whatever kind of character you want, with strengths and weaknesses that suit the kind of game that you want to play. But overall, I'd say the combat is pretty fun. Again, I don't normally play this type of game, but when done right, I can enjoy a good turn-based combat. And this one, you know what? I think it was pretty fun. I played the game pretty much exclusively on Tactician. Even on my first playthrough, I just started right on Tactician, and I never turned it off. So my entire experience is on the hardest difficulty. And you know, in my first playthrough, if I had made this video a couple weeks ago, I would have talked about how difficult Tactician truly was. Because there were some fights that I was stuck on for like 3 hours or something. Not all of them, but for the most part, I was able to, I don't want to say breeze through, but I was able to get through things. There were only a couple moments where things were really dicey and I had to get really creative. But then on my second playthrough, where I was obviously much more familiar not only with D&D systems in general, but also the specific encounters, and I knew what encounters were going to entail, the game was really easy. Even on the hardest difficulty, it was actually surprisingly much easier. Like literally night and day. I had to check multiple times that I was still on Tactician on my second playthrough because of how smoothly things were going compared to my first playthrough. So again, this is one of those situations where if you are newer to D&D, if you are less familiar with the systems, less familiar with just the game in general, you know, that's what those lower difficulties are really for. And that's probably what you should start off with, unless you're a stubborn idiot like me that's willing to sit there for 5 hours getting your ass beat by Githyanki. But once you know the systems, once you're familiar with the game, it really does. It is pretty easy, even on the hardest difficulty. And I don't think that's a problem for me, at least not right now, because again, you can play each character very differently. Let me just say, the magical items, the special items that you get in this game, some of these are insanely powerful. It is hilarious how busted my character was by the end of my second playthrough. Even my first playthrough, I was pretty strong. But my second playthrough, where I saw more of the content, and I was better at building a coherent character, I was basically unkillable. I was a walking fortress. I had like 27 AC, 23 strength, 23 constitution, because again, the items that you can get are quite powerful. I think that's actually something that they did a really good job of. There's a lot of pretty good items in this game, and you get them at a pretty good pace. Even early on, I thought initially, I'm used to, you know, more vertical progression games like an MMO or whatever, where the gear that you get early on in the game is kind of trash. So I wasn't really focused on picking up a lot of the things early on, because I just assumed, oh, well, I'll be replacing it later on. That's kind of true, but not really, because even the early stuff is pretty good. Obviously, the majority of the really strong stuff is like towards the end of the game, but that early stuff is not trash. It is not trash at all. Please don't be like me. But yeah, the itemization in this game is actually quite good. You can basically stack as many magical items as you want, and you can make your character really busted. And it's just a lot of fun. Building out your entire squad, decking people out with just so much stuff. And especially if you take the time to learn the system, or you're already familiar with the system, you can make some really busted characters, and you can just be an absolute menace to society. It's really satisfying. Pretty good power fantasy stuff. And I'm not really a power fantasy kind of guy, but this one was pretty good. Now, how long will I continue to be entertained by this combat system? Especially with how easy it is on subsequent playthroughs? I don't know. I'd imagine that I'd still be entertained, mostly because as long as I play a completely different character and go for a completely different playstyle, there is still value in these subsequent playthroughs. And of course, it's a very story-driven game, so again, as long as I'm making those different choices and seeing different things, it's still going to be worthwhile. I think even with it being pretty much easier on the subsequent playthroughs, the combat is still fun. I still enjoy combat, even now, 200-something hours in. And so I've been singing this game's praises for the entirety of the video. But now, let's talk about the things that are not so up to par. Talking about the bugs in Act 3. Again, this is one of those situations where if I made this video a couple weeks ago, I would have had, maybe a few more negative things to say. Because when the game first released and I reached Act 3 and those first couple weeks, there were a lot more noticeable performance issues. Regular frame drops, a lot more bugs. Some of them were kind of bad. And then of course there's a lot of controversy around cut content. Now, I'm not gonna get into this too deeply because this is a whole shit show. But apparently there was some data mining that revealed some cut content, and some people have theorized that a lot of this was like major content that should have been in the game but was cut at the last minute, and then the content was moved to another area, and Larian themselves had to put out a statement that that's not really the case, and that cut content is pretty normal for game development, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure it is. It's a whole bag of worms, but there is a general sentiment that Act 3 is rushed. And they point to this cut content as, oh look, they removed this stuff like at the last second, and then they had to cram some of the most important bits. That's why, a lot of Act 3 feels rushed. Again, Larian says otherwise. They could be lying. Maybe they're telling the truth. I don't know. Frankly, I also don't really care. Because at the end of the day, do I feel like Act 3 is rushed? Not really. I don't want to make it sound like Act 3 is bad, because it's not. I think Act 3 is good overall, in the grand scheme of things. But Act 3, compared to the first two acts, especially at launch when things were more buggy, definitely left a lot to be desired. The epilogues, in particular, even now feel somewhat unsatisfying because it's just like one cutscene, basically. One cutscene that's like technically made up of a sequence of different cutscenes depending on your choices and who's alive and that kind of thing. But it's basically one cutscene after the final boss, which doesn't feel like enough when you've traveled with these companions and you care so much about these companions for so long. It's serviceable, don't get me wrong, but is it perfect? There's a lot of people that wanted more, myself included. I think there's also the fact that two of the major antagonists, they have to share the spotlight in Act 3. And one of them really suffers for it. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but one of them does feel like they kind of look like a chump, like a bitch compared to the other two. This is especially true because one of the other major antagonists, they have the entirety of Act 2 essentially focused on them, and they're really cool as a result. So again, a lot of people say that, oh well, because they didn't have the upper city of Baldur's Gate available in the game, one of them was supposed to be the villain of the lower city and the other was supposed to be the villain of the upper city, which does make sense, but probably not the case, because the cut content theory also implies that they essentially took all of the content that was in the upper city and then just put it in the lower city. I'm not a game dev. I don't know if that's how game dev works, where you can just take content in one place and just... I don't think that works. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't know nothing. I just play games. That's it. That's all I do. But that sounds kind of sussy. Anyway, is Act 3 as bad as people make it out to be? No, I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's pretty good still. It could be better. It could be a little bit more satisfying. You definitely do start to feel some of the choices kind of constrict near the end. And of course, the bugs, which have largely been fixed by now, by the way. But there were a lot of bugs at launch that definitely made it feel like it wasn't quite ready to come out, but they had a date and they kind of had to be like, all right, it's time to go. But it was perfectly playable. Even with the bugs, it did not ruin my experience. I was never in a situation where I couldn't proceed with the game. So yeah, I think it was fine. I think it was good enough. More importantly, Larian has been on fire with the updates. And that's something that I am not really used to. Like, in the span of this past month, they have already done 2 major patches, like 4 or 5 hotfixes. I lost count, honestly. Thousands of bug fixes. And to be honest, a lot of the issues that I had, a lot of the bugs specifically that I had, especially in Act 3, have mostly been gone. I'm not saying the game is completely bug-free right now, because it's not, but it is significantly better already. I wasn't expecting this level of bug fixes to be out for months, but these motherfuckers did it in like weeks. And it should also be noted that they have at least acknowledged a lot of the issues that players have, like the epilogues, for example, and they have said that, yeah, they'll probably go back and add some more to that, add some more sauce to the end of the game, which will be a nice change. And, you know, hopefully we can maybe get some better conclusions for some of the companions. Again, I'm not spoiling nothing, but, you know, if you know, you know. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. And we know that Larian, from what I understand, I didn't really play much Divinity Original Sin 2, especially at launch, but they have been known to go back and tune up a lot of the, especially like the later act of like the final act in Divinity, and potentially add some new content. So, I don't know, maybe we'll see that. Do I think Act 3 needs a ton of new content? Honestly, no, because even on my latest playthrough, there was so much stuff to do that I was surprised at how long I was actually spending in Act 3. But I will never say no to more content. If they feel the need to add some more stuff in, especially for some of those antagonists that feel kind of lackluster, that would be great. And maybe in a year's time or something, we might get like a definitive edition that contains all of these bug fixes when it's finally actually feature complete and ready to just be done. Anyway, in case I haven't made myself clear throughout this entire video, I really like Baldur's Gate 3. This game is really, really good. It is easily one of the best games that I've played in a really long time. It completely caught me off guard at how much I was going to enjoy this. Again, I don't normally play these types of games, and I have already spent like 200 hours, and I still want to play the game. I think that counts for something. I say that this is almost certainly Game of the Year. I mean, granted, I don't really care that much what actually gets named Game of the Year, because it's kind of meaningless, but in my heart of hearts, Baldur's Gate 3, easily Game of the Year, no contest. It's just such a fantastic game, and hats off to everyone at Larian for this actual fucking masterpiece. Truly, this game is special. This feels like the kind of game that you only get every so often, like once in a decade kind of game. It's a very special kind of game that if you enjoy RPGs, again, I don't want to make it sound like this is the best game ever and that everybody will enjoy it, right? If you don't want to read, if you don't want to talk to characters, you want fast-paced, non-stop action, you're probably not gonna like it. But if you enjoy RPGs, if you enjoy role playing, if you enjoy character building, these kinds of things, I would say this is a must play for any RPG lover. It's that damn good. But yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, this is a phenomenal game. I highly recommend it to anybody. Again, if you are interested in this type of game, it is a must play. Whenever you have the money, whenever you have the time, do yourself a favor, get this game. It's just so good. So good. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I got. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. As you can tell, this is a very different kind of video than I normally do. So if you enjoyed it, please make sure you let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment, all the YouTube stuff. But more importantly, give me some feedback, because I was kind of stuck on this video for a couple weeks. I was kind of going through a trial and error. I wasn't really sure how to make it, and I was just kind of deadlocked. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna turn the mic on, turn the camera on, and then just start recording. So this has been very unscripted for the most part. So yeah, let me know if this is something that you'd like to see more of, because I want to keep making these kinds of videos where I just talk about games that I like. Anyway, that's truly all I got. I gotta actually edit this video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Hopefully, not in a month.